In the summer of 1985, 7 children vanished from Camp Echo, leaving behind empty beds, uneaten breakfast, and one cryptic message scratched into a canoe. The lake called us. For nearly 4 decades, the water held its silence. But in the summer of 2023, a drought finally drained Lake Echo dry. And what surfaced wasn't just a long-lost boathouse. It was a room filled with child-sized beds and an old camcorder that had never stopped recording. If you want more cinematic true crime thrillers based on buried secrets, real-life horrors, and investigations that dig too deep, subscribe now. July 3rd, 2023. Location: Lake Echo, Oregon. Dry lake bed near Camp Echo ruins. The ground shouldn't have cracked like that. Jeremy Acker paused, his boot lodged halfway into a split in the parched earth. The mudflat that had once been Lake Echo groaned beneath him, the drought carving deep veins across the lake bed like brittle skin. He tugged his foot loose with a sharp suck of air and cursed under his breath. 20 years with Oregon Parks, and he'd never seen the lake like this. Or rather, not seen it. Behind him, the gutted dock leaned sideways like a broken jaw, the last of its boards twisting in on themselves. What remained of Camp Echo sat half a mile up the ridge, reduced to moss-choked cabins and the ruins of a mess hall no one dared rebuild. It had been abandoned for decades, officially for budget reasons. Unofficially, everyone knew better. In 1985, 7 children had gone missing from Camp Echo. No bodies, no clues, no answers. Just a canoe drifting at dawn with a single word scratched into its bow. Come. A shiver crawled up Jeremy's spine as he scanned the brittle surface stretching in all directions. They'd drained the lake once before, during the 1992 sediment survey. But this drought had done what engineers couldn't, peeled back the lake like old wallpaper, revealing its bones. And something else. Ahead, where the cracked ground curved into a long-forgotten inlet, something wooden jutted from the silt. Not a tree, not driftwood. A building, low, squat, almost buried. Jeremy tightened his grip on the radio strapped to his shoulder. Base, this is Echo 4. I've got a structure on the south side of the lake bed. Looks like a boathouse, maybe? Not on any of the topo maps. Static, then. Copy that, Echo 4. Proceed with caution. Document everything. He approached carefully, each step sinking slightly. The building emerged slowly from the earth, like something exhumed, roof sagging. Shingles curled like burnt paper. A faded sign above the door, barely legible under decades of rot and sun. Lake Echo Boathouse. Established 1949. He found the door half buried in dried sludge. It took effort to pry it open, the wood cracking as it peeled away. The smell hit him first, dust, mildew, and something that made his stomach turn. Not rot, something colder, preserved. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and there they were. 7 beds, each child-sized, each with sheets still tucked in as if waiting. He stepped back, breath caught in his throat. That's when he saw it. On a shelf near the far wall, angled toward the beds, a camcorder. Old, early VHS. Still plugged into a wall outlet that should have gone dead decades ago. He moved closer, carefully lifting it by the grip. The light was still blinking. Record. Jeremy's fingers hovered over the button. Behind him, something shifted. July 4th, 2023. Location: Lake Echo, Oregon. Echo County Sheriff's Office. Detective Naomi Vega was supposed to be off duty. She stood at the break room window, coffee in one hand, cell phone buzzing on the counter beside her. Outside, the evening sun cast long orange fingers across the trees. Fireworks had already started, distant pops and crackles echoing off the ridge as families barbecued and kids sprinted around with sparklers. In her office, Her badge sat face down on the desk. She hadn't touched it all day, not since the anniversary, because today marked exactly 38 years since 7 children vanished from Camp Echo, and Naomi Vega had never stopped thinking about them. When the dispatch call came in at 7:42 p.m., she was halfway through a half-hearted attempt at heating leftover lasagna in the station microwave. Echo 4 to base. I've got something strange down here. You're going to want to notify the sheriff. What's strange, Echo 4? I found a structure beneath the lake, a boathouse, wasn't on the map. And 7 beds, all child-sized, still made, looks like they've been waiting. Pause. There's also a camera, VHS, still powered on, still recording. Naomi dropped her fork. 25 minutes later, she was riding shotgun in Deputy Ray Harper's cruiser, kicking up clouds of summer dust along the back road to Lake Echo. You think it's real? Harper asked. 7 beds in a boathouse nobody's seen since the Reagan administration? Naomi didn't answer. She was staring at the tree line ahead, where Lake Echo had once stretched wide and black beneath the moon. Now it was dry, drought dry. The lake bed had been shrinking for years. Locals blamed climate change, poor runoff, a dam 2 towns over. But nobody expected the reservoir to collapse completely, and nobody expected it to give up secrets. They arrived at 8:19 p.m. The lake was gone. In its place, a vast, cracked bowl of sun-baked mud and stone, spotted with driftwood and half-buried debris. Naomi squinted through the windshield and saw it, the shape emerging from the earth at the far end of the lake bed. A small building, faded shingles, rotting dock posts, and just above the doorway, a warped wooden sign, Lake Echo Boathouse, established 1949. Naomi stepped out of the cruiser, boots crunching dry silt. The heat clung to her skin. So did the feeling, that gnawing, deep in the bones kind of knowing. Something was very, very wrong. Jeremy Acker, the park ranger who had radioed it in, was waiting near the entrance, pale and shaken. I didn't touch anything, he said as she approached. Didn't even go past the second step. It didn't feel right. Naomi nodded once. Stay here. She ducked inside. The air was still, not musty, preserved, like something sealed away too long. 7 small beds lined the right wall, each one tucked tight with faded plaid blankets. The floor was swept. The wood wasn't even warped. It looked lived in. She scanned the room slowly, then stopped. A tripod, center of the room, mounted with an old RCA camcorder, still plugged in, still blinking, recording. Her voice dropped. Harper. He stepped in behind her, ducking instinctively. She pointed. Don't touch anything. Get CSU. Get the FBI now. Then she turned to the back wall, where something was carved into the wood above one of the beds. A name. Miriam. Scratched in with a child's hand. Back outside, Naomi took off her sunglasses. The heat had broken. Clouds were rolling in. The 4th of July sky was turning an angry blue-gray, thunder murmuring somewhere far off. She looked back at the boathouse, half-buried, silent, and still watching her, like it had been waiting for someone to come find it. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. The FBI Cold Case Task Force. This is Detective Naomi Vega, Echo County Sheriff's Office. We've reopened the Lake Echo 7. July 4th, 2023. Location: Lake Echo, Oregon, South Lake Bed Boathouse. Naomi Vega waited until the forensics team arrived before stepping back into the boathouse. She kept the door propped open, letting in the faint hum of distant fireworks, though it felt wrong. A holiday night bleeding into a crime scene buried under decades of silence. Deputy Harper was outside coordinating with the incoming units, while the sun dipped below the tree line and the clouds moved in thick and fast. Lightning flashed in the distance, but the air inside the boathouse remained still. preserved, undisturbed. Naomi crossed the threshold again, ducking beneath the sagging lintel. The VHS camcorder was still humming softly, its tiny motors spinning in defiance of time. She stepped toward it carefully, ducking behind the tripod to study the setup. The lens was trained directly at the beds, 7 narrow wooden frames, identical. Not cots. These were hand-built. Each one had the same coarse blanket, the same folded sheet, the same sun-faded pillow. But what struck her wasn't the order. It was the intent. This wasn't just an old storage room someone had forgotten. It was arranged, maintained, preserved, like someone wanted it to stay exactly as it had been, like a shrine or a stage. "Detective Vega," said CSU lead Meredith Hahn, stepping inside with gloves already on and a clipboard in hand. "You weren't kidding." "I don't kid," Naomi said, her voice low. Meredith walked a slow circle around the room, taking photos, noting every detail. The floorboards didn't creak. The light filtering through the warped slats caught motes of dust like suspended ash. "No mold," Meredith said aloud. "No rot. Some mildew, but minimal." Naomi motioned toward the outlet near the camcorder. "Still power?" Meredith knelt. "Looks like someone hardwired this into a secondary line. That's not utility power. Probably a buried generator. We'll have to dig." Naomi felt her stomach turn again. Someone had maintained this. Harper leaned in through the open door. "Storm's closing in. Weather service says we've got less than 2 hours before lightning hits this ridge." "Get what we can now," Naomi said. "Start with the beds. Swab everything. Lift prints, hairs, fibers. I want this room preserved." Harper hesitated. "You sure you want to stay? We can secure the site and come back tomorrow." She looked at him. Tired. Serious. "Number." "We've waited 38 years. I'm not leaving until I know what's on that tape." They brought in a portable VCR and a backup generator, setting it up on a folding table in the middle of the dried lake bed outside the boathouse. Naomi stood beside it, arms folded, while Harper worked the inputs with fumbling fingers. The tape slid in with a heavy thunk. Static flashed, then video, grainy, washed out. A date stamp flickered in the lower left corner, July 2nd, 1985. The footage began in the daylight, a shaky handheld view of Camp Echo. Kids running by the lake, counselors shouting names, laughter and splashing. Naomi's breath caught. She recognized one of the boys, Darren Clemens, age 11. His photo had been in every newspaper that summer. He was alive, laughing, real. Then the tape cut. Static again. A new timestamp, July 4th, 1985, 2:13 a.m. The footage was still. A fixed angle, the boathouse interior, the same 7 beds. Only now, they were occupied. 7 children, lying still, eyes closed, asleep, or drugged. Naomi stepped closer, heart pounding. On screen, a figure entered the frame from the right. Adult, male, tall, wearing a camp staff shirt, holding something, a mask. He moved bed to bed, placing his hand on each child's forehead, whispering something to the camera too quietly to hear. Then he turned and looked directly into the lens. Naomi's mouth went dry. "That's the head counselor," Harper said behind her, voice hoarse. "Michael Langford. But he died in 1986. Car crash, closed casket. I remember the news." Naomi didn't take her eyes off the screen. "You're sure?" "Positive." On screen, Langford held up a small, handwritten sign to the camera. 7 letters. "Come now." Then the screen cut to black. The tape clicked inside the VCR, rewind. Rain began falling. Slow at first, then harder, drumming on the cruiser roof and the boathouse tin. Naomi stood in the rain without moving. Somewhere out there, someone had kept the power going. Someone had kept the beds clean. Someone had kept the recording safe for nearly 4 decades. "Vega?" Harper said, stepping beside her. Do you think they were taken to that boathouse first? Naomi shook her head slowly. No. He blinked. Then what? She turned toward the building, watching lightning stretch across the hills in the distance. I think that wasn't the destination, she said. I think that was the waiting room. July 5th, 2023. Location: Echo County, Sheriff's Department. Archives. The morning after the storm broke gray and cold, like the weather had decided to mourn with them. Detective Naomi Vega stood alone in the basement archives of the Echo County Sheriff's Department, her breath fogging slightly in the stale air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of steel file cabinets stood in orderly silence, each drawer labeled in fading marker. The place smelled like old paper, mildew, and dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. She was looking for ghosts. Specifically, the ghosts of 7 missing children. The 1985 case files were stored under Cold Cases Unsolved, Children. Top drawer, center aisle. She opened it and pulled out a thick brown accordion file, heavy with age and grief. The outside was marked, Camp Echo Disappearances, July 4th, 1985. 7 victims, presumed abducted. Case closed, unsolved. No remains recovered. Last updated, April 1992. Naomi set the file down on the long metal table and opened it. The first page was a hand-drawn camp map. Cabins, mess hall, lake perimeter, trails into the woods. The spot where the canoe was found was marked with a red X. It was the only physical clue ever recovered. She flipped past it. Mug-shot-style photos stared back at her. School portraits with awkward smiles and crooked bangs. Darren Clemens, 11 Miriam Caldwell, 9 Trevor Hale, 13 Leo and Marcus Silva, twin boys, age 10. Emily Price, 8 Noah Bendix, 12. All 7 had vanished between midnight and 6 a.m. Their bunkmates claimed they'd gone to bed like normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. No screams, no struggle, and no staff had reported anything suspicious, except for one man, Michael Langford, the camp's head counselor. Langford had given the police a detailed timeline. Campfire at 8 o'clock, lights out at 9:30, bed checks at 10 o'clock. Then, supposedly, he went to sleep in the staff cabin. His interview transcript sat beneath the reports, typed on a clunky typewriter. Naomi scanned it quickly. I can't explain how they got past us. I checked every bed. No one saw anything. No one heard a thing. Langford passed a polygraph. He was never charged. He moved out of state the next year, died in a car accident in Colorado in 1986. Except Naomi had seen him last night. On the tape. She closed the file. There was more here than an abduction. The camera, the condition of the boathouse, the intentional preservation of it all. It wasn't just a crime scene. It was a message. Or worse, a continuation. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the object she hadn't mentioned in her initial report. A VHS tape found sitting beneath bed number 3. Taped to it was a piece of paper folded 3 times, yellowed with age. In careful childlike handwriting. For when they come back. Naomi slid it into a padded evidence envelope and wrote in thick Sharpie, Echo Tape 02, recovered from boathouse. She needed eyes on that footage. But first, she needed answers. She needed someone who knew that camp better than any outsider. She needed Loretta Mayfield. Loretta had been the camp nurse in 1985. Now she lived alone in a 1-story house near the edge of town. Her front yard overgrown, porch sagging under the weight of potted plants and a wind chime that never stopped. Naomi knocked twice. The door opened slowly. Loretta looked older than her years, early 70s, but with that brittle kind of tired that clings to the bones. Her eyes were pale, rimmed in red. You're here about the camp, she said. Naomi nodded. I need your help. Something surfaced. Loretta didn't ask what. She simply stepped aside, and let Naomi in. The living room smelled of dried lavender and old tea. Photos lined the mantel. Children Loretta had once cared for, some smiling, some too young to remember their time at Camp Echo. "I kept their files," she said, motioning to a plastic tote beside the bookshelf. "The county took what they wanted, but I held on to what they missed." Naomi crouched and flipped it open. Medical logs, attendance sheets, a laminated counselor schedule. "You knew Michael Langford?" Naomi asked. Loretta's face stiffened. "Too well." "You trusted him?" "No." That word came out too fast. He was charming, but calculated. Always volunteered to lead overnight hikes. He handpicked the kids for special mentoring. Said he saw potential. But he never let anyone else supervise his groups. He was smart, careful. Naomi pulled out a manila folder labeled Langford Observations. Inside, handwritten notes. Too affectionate with children, constant physical contact. Unwilling to allow medical checks on overnight return. Takes notes on specific kids in his personal logbook, keeps it locked. Miriam complained of nightmares, said he watches us sleep. Naomi's hands went cold. "Why didn't you say anything in '85? She asked. "I tried," Loretta whispered. "The sheriff at the time said I had no proof. Said I was just paranoid because I'd never had kids of my own." Naomi leaned back. "What if I told you he's on the boathouse tape? July 4th, 1985, walking among the beds, whispering to the camera." Loretta didn't blink. "I'd say the bastard planned all of it." As Naomi drove back through town, stormwater still puddled on the edges of the road. She called CSU. "Pull the camcorder," she said. "I want the tape inside it cataloged as Exhibit A. Check for fingerprints, recent handling, battery modifications, everything. And search the area near the boathouse," she added. "There's a generator buried somewhere. Find it." She hung up. Something was keeping those tapes alive, and someone had never stopped watching. July 5th, 2023. Location, Lake Echo, 600 yards south of Boathouse. The ground didn't give easily. 3 CSU techs knelt beside the sun-baked soil with metal detectors, carefully gridding the area based on Naomi's instructions. The southern lake bed, just beyond the boathouse, had cracked deeply from the drought, like something underneath had tried to push its way out and failed. And then, a ping, low and sharp, near a twisted tree stump that hadn't seen water in decades. "Detective," a tech called. "We've got something." Naomi crossed the dry silt quickly, squatting beside them. They were brushing away dirt with gloved hands, revealing a rusted metal hatch, 2 feet wide, flush with the sediment, hidden beneath what used to be 6 feet of water. There were scrape marks along the sides, like someone had opened and resealed it multiple times. Harper stood behind her, arms crossed, sweat glistening on his brow. "This what you were expecting?" "No," Naomi said, "but I'm not surprised." The techs pried it open. Inside sat a metal lockbox, heavy, vented, and humming. Naomi knelt and pressed her hand to the side. Warm, not hot, still active. A faint odor rose with the release of pressure, gas fumes and oil. One of the techs slid the box out and unlatched the front panel. Inside, a modified generator wired to a battery array, covered in dust, but clean where the cables connected. Someone had maintained this. The CSU lead, Meredith Hahn, confirmed what Naomi already suspected by early afternoon. "It's not factory," she said. "Homemade power relay system. Old as hell, but still functional. Batteries have been replaced within the last 2 years, and not by accident. This wasn't abandoned. Someone's been down here." Naomi stared at the generator. "Do we have any prints?" "Gloved, smudged. But there's something else." Meredith handed her a small plastic evidence bag. Inside, a dog tag, half rusted but still legible. "Langford, M, USMC, 312579844. Naomi clenched her jaw. Langford was never in the military, she said. That was one of his stories. Claimed it gave him authority over the kids. Meredith nodded. This one looks freshly planted. You think it's a message? No, Naomi said. I think it's a claim. By sunset, news of the discovery had already started to ripple beyond Echo County. Naomi sat in her cruiser near the lakebed, her tablet open to a video call with Special Agent Nora Raines of the FBI's Portland field office. A tired, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, Raines had worked cold case trafficking units since the late 90s. She didn't look surprised. You think the kids were being held there? Raines asked. They were definitely there at some point. We recovered 2 new tapes, footage from inside the boathouse, kids alive. July 4th, 1985. Raines leaned forward. You said tapes? Plural? Naomi hesitated. Yes, there's more. A collection. At least a dozen hidden tapes recovered under one of the beds. Indexed? Each labeled by name. Date stamped. Sequential numbering. Raines closed her eyes for a beat. Jesus, that's not random. That's documentation, organization, that's catalog-level abuse. Naomi felt it like a stone in her gut. We also recovered 1 unmarked tape, she added, found under a mattress. The case says, for when they come back. Raines stared through the screen. Someone expected them to return. No, Naomi said. Someone planned for us to. Later that night, Naomi and Harper returned to the station with the unmarked VHS in an evidence cooler. The forensics team logged it, cleaned the tape head, and prepped the room. Harper watched from the corner, arms folded. I've got a bad feeling about this one, he muttered. Naomi said nothing. She hit play. The footage crackled to life. Darkroom, the boathouse, but different this time. Only 1 bed. A girl sat on it, rocking slowly. Face turned away. Blonde hair tangled, thin arms wrapped around her knees, a stuffed rabbit on her lap. Miriam. Naomi recognized her immediately from the case file. The timestamp read, July 8th, 1985, 4:11 a.m. The camera didn't move. Then a man's voice, calm, precise. Miriam, tell them what happened, so they know, so they believe. The girl didn't respond at first. Then, barely above a whisper, he said the lake takes us when it's ready. Naomi froze. He told us we were chosen, that if we stayed quiet and obeyed, the water would let us live forever. So we stayed. A pause. But it lied. The girl turned toward the camera. One eye was swollen. A bruise bloomed across her cheek, but it was her expression that chilled Naomi. Not fear, not pain. Resignation. He's coming back soon, the girl whispered. And if you're watching this, then you're next. The tape cut. Silence flooded the room. Harper cleared his throat. Jesus Christ. Naomi stood, her pulse hammering in her ears. We need to reopen the entire perimeter around Camp Echo. Not just the boathouse, all of it. The cabins, the mess hall, the trail markers, any structure still standing. Harper nodded, already moving. Detective? One of the techs called from the back. We ran serial numbers on the camcorder and the backup generator. She turned. And they were both purchased on separate dates from a shop in Bend, Oregon. 5 years apart. Same credit card. Same name. He handed her the printout. Name on card. Caleb Langford. Date of birth, August 12th, 1986. Naomi stared at the paper. Michael Langford had died in 1986, but apparently someone had kept his name alive. And maybe someone had continued his work. July 6th, 2023. Location, Bend, Oregon. Riverside Storage Complex. The storage unit door groaned as it rolled upward. Naomi Vega stood just outside, gloved hands resting at her sides, eyes fixed on the dim interior beyond the metal threshold. Beside her, Deputy Harper clutched a flashlight and flexed his jaw like he was trying to keep it from clenching too hard. They had driven 3 hours east that morning. The address tied to the VHS camcorder purchase, the one used to document the children, had led them here. Unit 209, Riverside Storage. Rented in 2011 under the name Caleb Langford. Renewed every 6 months. Paid in cash. The clerk hadn't asked questions when Naomi presented the warrant. Just handed her a ring of keys and turned pale when she told him what they were investigating. The light from Harper's flashlight swept across the room. Inside was no furniture, no seasonal junk, no moving boxes or old mattresses like most of the surrounding units. Instead, a plastic folding table, a wall of metal shelving, dozens of VHS tapes and discs, each labeled in perfect, uniform handwriting, a small television VCR combo, and in the far corner, a child's cot, its sheets pristine and white. Naomi stepped forward slowly, each footstep echoing in the hollow space. She didn't touch anything, just looked, scanned, absorbed. The shelves were cataloged by year, 1985 through 1992, then a gap. Then, 2013 through 2023. "What the hell is this?" Harper murmured. Naomi already knew. It wasn't just documentation, it was continuation. She moved closer to the tapes. Each was labeled by date and subject, sometimes just a first name. One stood out immediately. Miriam, Volume 31, July 10th, 1985, Miriam, Volume 32, July 12th, 1985, Miriam, Final, July 14th, 1985. She felt her throat tighten, and beneath that row, newer labels. Rowan, Volume 1, March 2014, Madison, Volume 7, August 2019, Sophie, July 3rd, 2023. Naomi's blood turned cold. "Get CSU," she said flatly. "Now." Harper was already dialing. An hour later, the storage unit had been turned over to the crime scene unit from Bend PD. Naomi remained on site, eyes fixed on a black duffel bag they'd recovered from behind the shelving unit. Inside, 1 digital camera, 3 SD cards, a pair of pink canvas sneakers, children's size 12, a torn denim jacket with a faded camp patch. Camp Echo, established 1949, and a sealed envelope addressed in looping handwriting, "To the one who opens the lake." Naomi opened it with tweezers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in thick black marker. "You were warned. The water keeps what it's owed. The lake never gave them up. You did. But it's hungry again, and we have her. No name, no return address, no fingerprint on the paper, just that single message." Naomi returned to the cruiser and closed the door. She stared at the paper in her lap. Her hands trembled, just slightly. Not from fear, but from rage. For 38 years they had thought the lake held the bodies, but it didn't. It delivered them to someone. Someone who called himself Caleb Langford. That night, Naomi called Special Agent Rains again. This time, her voice held no hesitation. "I want to reopen every unsolved missing child case within a 200-mile radius of Echo County between 2012 and now." Rains didn't argue. "Should we treat this as organized trafficking?" she asked. Naomi shook her head. "Number, this isn't commerce, it's ritual. Controlled, patterned." Rains was silent a moment. "And what do you think Caleb Langford is trying to do?" Naomi looked out the window of her motel room, where a crescent moon had begun to rise. "He's trying to finish what Michael started." Across the state, in a windowless room deep underground, a man sat watching. 7 monitors, 7 beds, 1 camera on each. The feeds were old, low resolution, the lighting always pink. On monitor 3, a child stirred, maybe 10 years old, maybe younger. Long dark hair, sitting up slowly. The man leaned forward and pressed record on the console. He smiled. "You're awake, Sophie," he whispered. "Good girl." July 7th, 2023 location, Echo County, Camp Echo ruins. The forest had taken back most of Camp Echo. Naomi Vega stepped out of the cruiser and scanned the remnants of what used to be the main path. Tree roots split through old concrete. Ivy coiled around the skeletal frame of a mess hall that hadn't hosted a meal since Reagan was in office. The welcome sign, once cheery with painted handprints, now hung by one rusted nail. The word "welcome" faded to a grayish whisper. Only the trail markers remained, and even they were rotting. "God," Harper muttered behind her. "It's like the place tried to bury itself." "Or hide something," Naomi replied. They had come back with a tactical unit, cadaver dogs, and a blueprint of the original camp layout recovered from the archives. Their goal was clear: search every remaining structure, crawl space, and foot of dirt. They had reason to believe the boathouse wasn't the only hidden room. Naomi's hunch wasn't about what she hoped to find. It was about what had been deliberately left behind. They started with the staff cabins, half collapsed, stinking of mildew and rodents. The floorboards groaned beneath their boots. Nothing but dust, dead mice, and a few rusted metal bunk frames. But the third cabin, once used by the senior counselors, had something different. Harper found it. "Vega," he called, crouching near the closet in the back bedroom. "You're going to want to see this." She knelt beside him. A section of floor had been recently disturbed. Dust cleared. Wood scraped. There was a seam. Naomi used her pocket knife to pry it. A square panel lifted. Underneath, a narrow hatch, hinged, padlocked shut. The padlock was new. Too new for a building abandoned nearly 4 decades ago. Harper stepped back. "You thinking another crawl space?" "No," Naomi said. "I'm thinking a second room." The SWAT team used bolt cutters to snap the padlock. The hatch lifted with a creak, revealing a tight staircase descending into blackness. The air that came up was colder than it had any right to be. Harper clicked on his flashlight. "Smells like bleach." The team descended in silence. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a room carved into the earth. 10 by 15 feet, concrete walls, no windows, no furniture except a small desk and a metal chair. Mounted on the far wall was a corkboard filled with maps, trail systems, topography of the lake bed, dated satellite images with sections outlined in red ink. Pinned beneath them, photographs, children, school portraits, Polaroids, candid shots of kids at parks, crossing streets, walking alone, dozens of them. Naomi stepped forward slowly. Her eyes fell on one photo, a girl with long dark hair wearing a red backpack. Sophie, the one Caleb Langford had mentioned in his envelope, the one on the most recent tape. And there, at the bottom of the board, was a handwritten note. 7 beds, 7 children, always. The lake chooses, we only obey. Naomi felt a chill spider its way down her spine. "He's planning another cycle," she said softly. "Or he already has." They cleared the rest of the camp over the next 6 hours. Cabin B had a trap door beneath a wardrobe, empty, but with restraints bolted to the sub-floor. The old bathhouse had been used more recently than any of them expected. The soap wrappers and towels were less than a year old. Behind the art shed, they found a small fire pit, partially burned journals, melted plastic, charred bones too small to be animals. By dusk, the dogs had picked up a scent trail leading northeast, away from the lake, deeper into the woods, toward the old fire trail that hadn't been cleared since the 80s. Naomi followed it on afoot with the handlers. It led to an overgrown trailhead and a locked chain-link gate. On the gate, painted in white, "We serve the water." That night, back at the station, Naomi spread the maps across her desk. All of them centered around Lake Echo, and all of them led here, to Camp Echo. But one map, older than the rest, caught her attention. It wasn't a camp map. It was a geological survey from the 1960s. On it, a small inlet, long since flooded by the creation of the reservoir, was marked with an X. Under it, original settler cellar, do not disturb, sealed 1891. She cross-referenced it with current GPS coordinates. It was directly beneath the old caretaker's cabin. The same cabin Caleb Langford's credit card was used to rent equipment for last year. Naomi sat back. The cellar had never been searched. At 2:37 a.m., her phone rang. It was Meredith from Forensics. "We got a match on the fingerprints found on one of the tapes." Naomi blinked. "You said the prints were smudged." "One wasn't," Meredith said. "It was inside the cassette cover, and it belongs to someone who shouldn't be alive." Naomi stood. "Who?" "Michael Langford. July 8th, 2023. Location, Echo County. Caretaker's cabin, Camp Echo grounds. The morning broke hot and windless. Naomi Vega stood in the shadow of the old caretaker's cabin, staring down at the flagstone foundation. Unlike the other structures, this one hadn't collapsed under time. Its frame was intact. The porch sagged but stood, and the front door still bore a brass nameplate. M. Langford. "Your boogeyman had a mailbox," Harper muttered behind her. Naomi didn't laugh. The geological map in her hand marked this spot with a red X. Settler cellar, sealed 1891. If it existed, the cellar would predate Camp Echo itself. The camp had been built on top of it. On purpose, she now believed. And Langford had known. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet as they moved through the cabin. It smelled like cedar and dust. Someone had cleaned here, recently. The mantel had no cobwebs. A ceramic mug rested on the table, cracked but upright, as if someone had stepped out and never returned. Naomi checked the kitchen first. Harper checked the bedroom. Both empty. But behind the pantry, Naomi spotted it. A square seam in the wall. She knocked once. Hollow. She pried it open with her multi-tool. Behind it, a stairwell led downward, disappearing into blackness. The air that rushed out was cold, metallic, and damp. "Langford's rabbit hole," Harper muttered. He drew his weapon. "You first?" Naomi flicked on her flashlight. "Always." The stairs descended longer than expected, at least 20 feet, into solid bedrock. The air grew heavier with each step, until they reached a narrow landing that opened into a vaulted stone room. The walls were old, stacked by hand, mortarless, and the ceiling curved like a tunnel. But the space had been renovated. Electrical wiring strung through PVC pipe, 2 overhead bulbs, wired to a power strip. A steel cot bolted into the far wall, and in the center, a table with 3 chairs, one chair smaller than the others. Child-sized Naomi stepped into the middle of the room and turned slowly. The walls were covered in chalk drawings, faded, childlike, stick figures holding hands beside a lake. A tall man with a square head, 7 small beds, a son with no face, then a different drawing. The same tall man, standing beside what looked like a church with water rising around it. Beneath it, written in blocky handwriting, "The lake knows." Harper swept the far end of the chamber. "Vega," he called, "found something." She crossed the room quickly. A locked freezer. Old dented electrical cord snaked into the wall. It hummed softly. She nodded to Harper. "Open it!" He used a pry bar from the gear bag. The lid creaked. Inside were plastic bags, each labeled in permanent marker. Hair, Miriam. Tooth, Trevor. Fingernail, Sophie. Naomi recoiled. They weren't just trophies. They were inventory. There was a table in the back with notebooks stacked neatly. Handwriting filled every page. Dense, methodical, scientific. Langford's journals. She flipped one open. The lake requires 7. It always has. 7 to bind, 7 to feed, 7 to last another cycle. Chosen children must be kept pure. Ritual exposure to water primes the mind. The room must be pink. Always pink. The princess room was the first. The boathouse was second. The cellar is final. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. This was ritualistic abuse wrapped in pseudo-religious delusion, carefully maintained for generations. Langford hadn't been a rogue predator. He'd been a caretaker of a belief system. Naomi turned to Harper. "We're not looking at one man." He nodded grimly. "This was passed down, rehearsed." She closed the journal. "Langford started it, but Caleb's trying to finish it." Harper's voice dropped. "You think Sophie's still alive?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "Yes." Back above ground, they roped off the cabin and called in a forensic excavation team. Meredith Hahn arrived with a mobile unit 2 hours later. They recovered 3 child-sized garments with trace blood, 14 VHS tapes in a wooden crate, 1 pair of handcuffs still latched, a hidden compartment beneath the cot, holding an envelope labeled Final Cycle 2023. Inside the envelope, a drawing, crude, childlike, of the 7 beds in the boathouse. Only 1 bed was occupied, and the figure in the bed had X's over its eyes. That night, Naomi sat at her desk staring at the whiteboard, now covered in notes. 1985. 7 children vanish 1986. Langford dies in crash. Closed casket 2013 to 2023. New tapes begin Caleb Langford surfaces. Sophie appears on footage July 3rd. Final cycle, labeled for 2023 7 children. 1 alive, 6 unaccounted for. She picked up the camp map again and traced her finger to the last marked structure, an equipment shed that hadn't been searched. There, in the margin, barely visible, a handwritten note, scribbled in red ink. 7 go in. Only 1 must return. In a room miles away, beneath flickering fluorescent light, Caleb Langford adjusted a camera. Behind him, 6 beds, empty. Ahead of him, 1 bed, occupied. Sophie lay curled up, eyes closed, breathing shallow. He pressed the button on the camcorder. "Final recording," he said softly. Then he began to sing, a slow, haunting lullaby. "Go to sleep, child of the lake. The world is gone, but you'll awake. 7 dreams for 7 years. Wash away your mother's tears." July 9th, 2023. Location, Echo County Sheriff's Office, Incident Command Center. The command center had taken over the conference room. Maps were pinned to every wall. Drone footage from Lake Echo streamed on 2 monitors. A whiteboard listed recovered names, evidence markers, and projected search zones. In the center of the room, Naomi Vega stood with a dry erase marker in her hand, red ink staining her fingertips like blood. On the board, she had written 1 sentence in block letters: 1 bed remains. Behind her, Harper scrolled through aerial scans from that morning's drone sweep. "This one," he said, tapping the screen. "You see it?" Naomi leaned in. A sliver of roof, barely visible through a veil of trees east of the dried lake bed. A building not on any modern survey maps. Smaller than a cabin, almost invisible without the right angle. "Distance?" she asked. "About 1.6 miles from the old caretaker's cabin. No road access, no marked trail." Naomi straightened. "Then we go on foot." They reached the edge of the tree line by 10:40 a.m. Harper, Naomi, and 2 tactical officers from the State Patrol hiked in silence, their radios muted except for location check-ins every 10 minutes. The heat pressed down like wet fabric, and the forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the heavy crackle of branches underfoot. At 11:12, Naomi spotted it. A 1-room structure. No windows, no signage. Just a steel door, bolted shut and painted the exact color of bark. Langford didn't want it found, Harper said. Naomi nodded. Or he didn't want her to leave. They breached the door with a ram. Inside, a pink room. Every surface, the walls, the floor, the mattress, the stuffed animals, was a variation of soft pink. The lighting was muted and unnatural. A set of dim LEDs ran around the ceiling edges, casting the room in a constant low glow. In the center, Sophie, lying on the bed, alive, but barely. Naomi was the first to reach her. The girl flinched when Naomi touched her shoulder, then slowly opened her eyes. Sunken cheeks, pale lips, bones like branches beneath her skin. "Hi," Naomi whispered. "You're safe now." I promise Sophie didn't speak, just blinked slowly. Harper stepped in, face ashen. "There's no bathroom, no sink, no windows, no sound. It's a deprivation cell." Naomi scooped the girl into her arms. She was light as paper. Back at the station, paramedics stabilized Sophie and airlifted her to Portland Children's Hospital. Naomi rode with her in the chopper, holding her hand the entire flight. Sophie never said a word, but when they rolled her into triage, she looked back at Naomi and whispered, "He said I was the last dream." Then she passed out. That evening, CSU finished analyzing the tapes recovered from the hidden cellar. Meredith Hahn met Naomi in the evidence locker with red-rimmed eyes. "There were 6 more victims," she said, "from 2013 to 2023, each year. 1 child, all girls, all filmed in the pink room." Naomi's stomach turned. "Names?" she asked. "Some. First names, no last names. Ages range from 7 to 11. Naomi closed her eyes. "Any bodies?" "Not yet. But we found disposal notes, burn sites, burial zones, locations." Meredith handed her the sheet. 3 marked near the northern edge of the lake. The other 3, all near the equipment shed. By nightfall, officers had uncovered shallow graves at 2 of the marked points. The remains were confirmed to be juvenile and partially incinerated. Dental records would take time, but Naomi knew. The lake hadn't swallowed them. Langford had. At 11:48 p.m., Naomi returned to her motel. Her phone vibrated as she stepped into the room. It was Rains. "We confirmed the DNA," she said. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed. "Whose?" "The man calling himself Caleb Langford." Naomi held her breath. "He's not a son," Rains continued. "Not a nephew, no legal ties, but there is a match." Naomi leaned forward. "Who?" Rains was quiet for a moment. Then, "He is Michael Langford." Naomi's blood ran cold. "That's not possible." "It is," Rains said. "He faked his death in 1986. The crash was staged. Dental records were falsified. His real name before the identity change was Caleb Myron Langford." Naomi's thoughts spun. He'd been hiding in plain sight, rebuilding his ritual, continuing the cycle, alive. And out there, 3 hours away, in a darkened cabin lit only by a TV screen, an older man watched the evening news. A photograph of Sophie filled the frame, pixelated and labeled. "Rescued from alleged child captivity in Echo County. Investigation ongoing." The man smiled. He set down his mug, stood, and walked to a wall lined with photographs. The 7 beds, each with a child's name scrawled beneath. He crossed out one name in black ink. Sophie. Dream complete. Then he picked up a new marker. Naomi. Dream begins. July 10th, 2023. Location, Portland Children's Hospital. Secure pediatric wing. Naomi Vega stood outside room 314, watching Sophie through the observation window. The girl lay in a hospital bed too big for her tiny frame, hooked to fluids and heart monitors, a pale pink blanket tucked to her chin. Her eyes fluttered open every few minutes. but she didn't speak. Nurses said she hadn't said a word since whispering to Naomi 2 nights ago. He said I was the last dream. Naomi couldn't stop hearing it, over and over again. What disturbed her most wasn't the words themselves. It was the calm in Sophie's voice. Not fear, not confusion, belief. Dr. Leanna Morse, the hospital's child trauma specialist, joined Naomi in the hallway. She's stable, Morse said. Physically malnourished, but not beyond repair. No evidence of recent physical abuse, but we suspect long-term psychological conditioning. Naomi nodded. Stockholm? Not exactly. It's deeper. Groomed belief systems, language patterns, ritual behavior. She doesn't cry. She doesn't ask for her parents. She flinches when you turn off the lights, but not when someone touches her. She was trained, Naomi whispered. Dr. Morse frowned. She was shaped. Naomi stepped closer to the glass. Can I try? Morse paused. She knows you. She responded to you. Just take it slow. Inside the room, Naomi pulled a chair close and sat down beside Sophie's bed. The girl's eyes opened, wide and alert. Naomi smiled gently. Hey, sweetheart. Sophie blinked slowly. I brought you something, Naomi said, holding up a drawing pad and a box of markers. Sophie reached out without hesitation. She opened the box, selected a pink marker, and began to draw. Naomi watched in silence. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Sophie was drawing a room. 7 beds, 1 door, a camera in the corner. Naomi leaned forward. Is that where he kept you? Sophie nodded once. Then she flipped the page and drew Naomi, standing outside the room with a flashlight. That's me? Naomi asked. Sophie smiled faintly. Then, with the same pink marker, she wrote a single word beneath the drawing. Last. Later that afternoon, Naomi met Special Agent Rains in the hospital cafeteria. Rains looked like she hadn't slept in 48 hours. Probably because she hadn't. We confirmed something else, she said, sliding a file across the table. Naomi opened it. Inside, grainy black and white surveillance stills from a gas station 2 counties south. A man at a payphone, wearing a faded flannel shirt, baseball cap, large duffel slung over one shoulder. The date stamp, July 9th, 2023, 11:16 p.m. It's him, Rains said. Michael Langford, alive. Voice matched to the boathouse tapes. Facial structure confirmed through enhanced comparison. Naomi studied the photos. He looked ordinary. Older, gaunt. But the eyes were the same. Cold. Controlled. How'd we miss this for 38 years? She whispered. Rains exhaled. Because he wanted us to. Back at the sheriff's department, Harper was waiting with bad news. We've had 2 more disappearances, he said. Naomi froze. When? Last night. 2 towns over. Siblings. A 9-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. Their parents said they were camping in the backyard. The tent was empty this morning. No signs of struggle. Naomi's heart dropped. We're running their names now, Harper added. But guess what we found in the backyard? He handed her a photo. A single VHS cassette left on a picnic table. Labeled in blocky handwriting, Cycle 2 begins. The next morning, Naomi returned to Sophie's room. The girl had drawn more, dozens of pictures taped to the wall now. Some featured Langford. Some showed Sophie holding a candle. Others showed Naomi. Always alone. Always standing in front of a pink room. One new drawing sat unfinished on the bed. Sophie had drawn 7 doors. 6 were open. 1 remained closed. Naomi knelt beside her. Do you know where he is? Sophie nodded faintly. She picked up a red marker and began drawing something Naomi didn't recognize. A jagged cliff with a lake below. A tower. A cross. Naomi recognized the cross. It wasn't a religious symbol. It was the old fire lookout tower above Lake Echo. abandoned for years, accessible only by foot or ATV. She picked up her phone and called Harper. "Gear up," she said. "We found him." 4 hours later, a tactical unit surrounded the tower. Naomi stood at the base, staring up the narrow staircase that snaked along the side like a vertebra. Above her, silence. "Thermal drone picked up one heat signature inside," Harper whispered. "No movement." "Just one?" He nodded. Naomi took the lead. The climb was slow, deliberate. When she reached the final step, she paused outside the cabin-style platform. She knocked once. No answer. Then she pushed open the door. Inside, the air was cold. On the wall, a TV played static. A VHS tape looped endlessly, the boathouse footage. A bed, a child breathing. But the tower was empty. Langford was gone. In his place, a message written on the inside of the door in permanent marker. "The lake knows your name, Naomi. The cycle has already begun." July 11th, 2023. Location: Echo County, Northern Perimeter Search Zone. Naomi Vega didn't sleep. Instead, she paced the mobile command unit while storm clouds rolled over the ridgeline and cast the lakebed in cold shadow. The mood among the team had shifted from hopeful to haunted. Langford had slipped through their fingers again. Worse, 2 more children were now missing, and the tape labeled "Cycle 2 Begins" was being analyzed frame by FBI techs in Quantico. "We found something," Meredith said over the phone that morning. The VHS tape left at the siblings' house wasn't a recording. Naomi blinked. Then what was it? An audio track, reversed. When we flipped it, it was just a voice. Naomi sat up. "Langford's? Definitely. But he's not taunting this time. He's chanting." She paused. "It's ritual language, repeated 7 times. Each phrase ends with a different name." Naomi's stomach turned. Are the new children among them? One is, the girl. And the rest? Meredith was quiet a moment too long. "They're all girls, all ages 7 to 11, all previously missing. From 1985, that afternoon, Harper and a K-9 unit tracked the scent of the missing siblings into the North Woods. They followed it half a mile before the dogs froze at a clearing. The remains of a campfire. Recent, a folded blanket, a discarded backpack, and a spiral carved into the dirt. Naomi crouched beside it. "Same spiral as the cellar," she whispered. "Same shape drawn by Sophie. This is ceremonial." Harper nodded toward the tree line. Drag marks. Something heavy was pulled into the brush. The dogs picked up the scent again. It led to an old storm culvert running under the highway. Inside, pitch black. Just water trickling. Naomi hesitated. Then she crawled inside. The tunnel went on for 30 yards, narrowing as it went. Naomi's flashlight beam bobbed across slick concrete and stagnant puddles. Near the center, she spotted something wedged between 2 rocks. A Polaroid. Soggy, fading. But the image was clear. Sophie, sitting upright in the pink room, smiling faintly. Behind her, the reflection of a man in the corner mirror. Face partially obscured. Not Langford. Someone younger, taller. Naomi's blood ran cold. It wasn't one man. It was 2. Back at HQ, she laid out every image, every file, every drawing from Sophie. The clues had been there, the mirror in the room. The 2 voices Sophie had whispered about in her sleep. The newer tapes showing differences in camera angles and lighting. Langford had an accomplice, likely younger, possibly one of the camp counselors. Sophie had drawn repeatedly, stick figures with badges and hats. She called Rains. "Langford trained someone to continue this," she said. "A protege, someone local, someone under the radar." Rains responded without hesitation. "We'll check visitor records, local employment databases, Ex-employees of Camp Echo or the Echo State Park System. Cross them against male individuals ages 35 to 55. Anyone with ties to Langford or a missing identity history. We're on it. Naomi hung up and stared at the corkboard. She was missing something. That evening, Sophie stirred in her hospital bed. Dr. Morse called Naomi immediately. "She asked for you." Naomi arrived within the hour. Sophie was sitting up now, eyes focused, fingers clutching a drawing pad. She handed Naomi a picture, a mirror, with two faces, one behind the other. "The second man?" Naomi asked. Sophie nodded. Then she whispered, "He wore the fox mask." Not the lake man, the red man. Naomi stared. She remembered the storage unit. Among the evidence, a red plastic mask with pointed ears, animal-like. She flipped through the log sheet. It had been labeled, "Property recovered from boathouse." Mask, red fox. That night, Naomi returned to the storm culvert alone. She needed to see the area again. This time, she followed the second tunnel branching off from the main drain. Near the end, she found a small opening, a man-made crawl space reinforced with timber. Inside, a trap door sat beneath a loose pile of rocks. She forced it open. A narrow shaft dropped 10 feet into a hidden basement. One single room, and in it, 6 empty beds. A camera on a tripod, and on the wall, freshly written in red chalk, 6 dreams gone, 1 more to wake. Then the lake sleeps again. Naomi backed out slowly. Whoever had written that had been here recently, and he was still nearby, watching. Miles away, in the dark woods, a man knelt by a stone altar carved into the roots of a giant cedar tree. Beside him, the missing siblings, dosed, asleep. He opened a worn book and whispered, "6 dreams whispered, 1 shall burn. The 7th wakes, and tides will turn." Then he raised the fox mask and slipped it over his face. The red man was ready. July 12th, 2023. Location, Echo County, North Woods Extraction Grid. The woods were wet from overnight rain, and the clouds hadn't lifted since dawn. The scent of damp cedar and churned earth clung to the air like smoke. Naomi Vega adjusted the strap of her Kevlar vest and double-checked her holster. She was done waiting, done chasing shadows. The red man had 2 children. The 7th dream was approaching. They had hours, at most. Thermal drone picked up a heat source half a mile northeast, Harper said, stepping beside her. Stationary. Could be a shelter or a heat trap. Or a fire, Naomi said. He nodded grimly. A team of 8 moved in, silent and deliberate. No radios, no chatter. At the front of the group, Naomi led with her weapon drawn. The forest closed in fast. The trees here were older, untouched by camp development, heavy with moss and silence. They moved along an unmarked ridge until the drone operator called out, "Structure dead ahead, earth-packed. Looks like a bunker." Naomi crouched low, studying the mound of dirt and rotted timber barely visible beneath layers of ferns. Harper moved beside her. "No door." "There will be," Naomi said. "This was built to hide, not breathe." She ran her gloved hand across the soil until she found the seam, a slab of wood with reinforced steel hinges and a recessed latch. Not old, not original. Modern. They breached the hatch quietly and descended into pitch dark. The air changed instantly, colder, metallic, laced with mildew and something else. Decay. The walls were raw stone. The floor was packed dirt. But there was light ahead, flickering firelight. Naomi raised her weapon and turned the corner. There they were. The 2 children, unconscious, placed side by side on a wooden table. Between them, candles, salt lines, chalk symbols. Behind them, a man in a red fox mask, holding a small blade above the girl's chest. Naomi stepped in. "Don't!" The man froze. Slowly, he turned, revealing the mask in full, painted eyes, sharp grin. He tilted his head, then spoke. "You came early." "The dream's not finished." Naomi kept her weapon steady. "Step back, hands where I can see them." The red man smiled beneath the mask. "The lake doesn't need sight, it needs sacrifice." He raised the blade. A single shot rang out. Harper fired. The man dropped instantly, crumpling beside the altar. Naomi rushed forward, checked the pulse. Still alive, barely. The blade clattered to the floor. Naomi turned to the children. Both were breathing, sedated but stable. "We need evac," she called over her shoulder. "Now!" Back above ground, medics airlifted the children out. The red man, now in custody, was loaded into a separate unit. Naomi watched the helicopter vanish into the mist, then walked slowly back to the site entrance. Harper caught up beside her. "We got a name." She turned. "Who?" "Elias Boone. Worked Firewatch up until 5 years ago. Lived off-grid since. No priors, nothing on file." "Langford's recruit," she said. "He took over." Harper held up a small book they'd recovered from the bunker. Langford's handwriting, ritual diagrams, names of each child, instructions. At the bottom of one page, underlined in red, "When the seventh lies still, the lake may rest. Until then, eyes must stay closed." Later that night, Naomi returned to Sophie's room. The girl was awake, sitting upright, drawing again. She smiled when Naomi entered. "Did you stop the red man?" she asked. Naomi knelt beside her. "We did." Sophie paused. "He wasn't supposed to be the last." Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" Sophie flipped to a new page in her pad. Drew 7 doors again, but this time, 1 door remained open. "He left something behind," Sophie whispered. "Something still inside." Naomi leaned closer. "Where?" Sophie tapped the drawing. "The room with no dreams." Naomi stared. Then she understood. Back at the original boathouse, now sealed and quarantined, Naomi and Harper returned at dawn. They bypassed the police tape and entered through the crawl space. The 7 beds were still there, untouched, cameras dismantled, forensics complete. But Naomi wasn't looking at the beds. She was staring at the floorboards. She knelt down and ran her hand across the grain. There, a tiny nailhead, out of place. She pried it up with her knife. A panel popped free. Inside the crawl space, a small box wrapped in faded cloth. She opened it. Inside, a VHS tape labeled in Langford's writing, "Naomi Dreams 7." Harper stepped back. "Jesus!" Naomi's hand shook. She placed the tape into the field player. The screen flickered. A grainy video of Naomi, aged maybe 8 or 9, standing at a lakeside trail, looking directly at the camera, smiling. "Say your name for the lake," a voice said. "Naomi," the child whispered. "Naomi Vega." "You are Dream 7, the voice replied. "You belong to the water." Naomi dropped the player. She staggered backward. Harper caught her arm. "Vega?" She didn't answer, because the next line on the tape played, "You'll come back when it's time. The cycle always returns." July 13th, 2023. Location, Camp Echo, Lower Lake Trail. Naomi Vega walked the lake bed alone. The sky above was blank and gray, and the wind had stopped. Not even the trees rustled. The silence was unnatural, too still, like the entire valley was holding its breath. In her backpack was the VHS tape. In her head, the voice echoed, "Naomi, you are Dream 7. Harper had tried to stop her. "You're too close to this now," he'd said. "You don't need to chase ghosts. We have Langford's system mapped. Boone's in custody. Sophie's safe. The children are coming home." But Naomi hadn't told him about the tape. Hadn't told him about the memory it stirred. The lake trail. The man behind the camera. the sound of her mother's voice calling for her in the distance, and Naomi not answering. By midday, she reached the southern ridge. There, half buried under soil and moss, was a concrete hatch, the final piece of the map Sophie had drawn 2 days earlier. It wasn't part of any park plans. It wasn't part of the camp. It was older. She pried it open and descended a narrow staircase into complete blackness. Her flashlight flickered, the battery already low. She passed through a curved tunnel lined in stone, carvings etched every few feet. 7 spirals, 7 names, a final line chiseled beneath the archway ahead. What sleeps beneath wakes in her. Naomi stepped into the last chamber and stopped cold. It was a room of mirrors, floor to ceiling, angled to reflect infinitely. Light from her flashlight bounced in all directions, casting hundreds of Naomis back at her. And in the center, a single chair. A VHS player sat beside it, already loaded. Above it, a screen flickered. She pressed play. The footage showed her again, a child, no more than 9, being led down this very path. But this time, she was holding someone's hand. The man's face never showed, but the voice did. Your mother doesn't want you to be special, but you are. You belong to the lake. The child version of Naomi looked straight into the camera and said, I dreamed of drowning, but I didn't wake up. Then the tape cut to static. Naomi pressed pause. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a participant. Back at the sheriff's station, Raines slammed down a report. We've traced Naomi Vega's family history. She's not just a local. Her mother was one of the Echo Camp volunteers in 1985, assigned to the Langford unit. Harper stared at her. You're saying Naomi was at Camp Echo as a child, briefly, enrolled under a false name. Her mother pulled her out after a disciplinary incident. No records were kept. Was she selected? Raines didn't answer. Naomi emerged from the tunnel 2 hours later, covered in dirt, sweat, and fear. She didn't speak when Harper met her on the trail, but she handed him the tape and said, It's not over. That night, Sophie awoke from her sleep screaming. Dr. Morse ran in. Nurses followed. Sophie clutched her chest, hyperventilating. There's one more, she cried. One more dream. He's still under the water. Who, honey? Dr. Morse asked gently. Sophie pointed out the window toward the dry lake bed. The original, the first dream, the one who never woke up. At 4:17 a.m., a ranger patrol reported movement near the southern dam. Naomi and Harper raced there. In the center of the drained lake, near a partially collapsed stone structure, they found an opening, a new shaft, one that hadn't been visible before the drought. Inside, beneath 30 feet of packed soil and clay, was a final room. No beds, just a single coffin. Inside it, the mummified remains of a child, a girl, holding a stuffed bear and wearing a Camp Echo bracelet. The name etched into the wooden lid, Miriam Langford, Dream 1, 1984. Naomi stood over the coffin in silence. Langford's daughter, the first child he ever preserved, the one he claimed the lake had taken. Naomi turned to Harper. He built the cycle to bring her back, she whispered. 7 dreams, 7 vessels, each one a failed resurrection. And the last? Harper asked. Naomi looked out across the dry basin, then down at her own hands. She was never meant to return, just to wait. At dawn, Sophie drew her final picture. It showed Naomi standing in the lake, alone, but in the reflection below her feet was Miriam, smiling. July 19th, 2023. Location, Lake Echo, Observation Ridge. The rains returned slowly. 2 days after the last coffin was lifted from the drained lake bed, a heavy storm system rolled in from the west. By morning, the water had begun to rise. a slow, muddy reclaiming of everything buried. Naomi Vega stood on the observation ridge in a gray parka, hood down, letting the mist soak her hair. Below her, the lake was waking up again. The children had all been identified now. 7 confirmed victims across nearly 4 decades, all girls, all vanished within Echo County, all documented on the Langford tapes, except one, Naomi. Her own file had been quietly removed from the federal casebook. Raines had done that for her. "There's no proof," she'd said gently. "Only a tape and a feeling. If you want it erased, it's erased." But Naomi hadn't watched it again. She didn't need to. The memory had returned on its own now, a shadowy afternoon in 1985, her mother pulling her away from camp early, the voice of a man she never saw calling from the woods. "Naomi, Naomi, come back." She had once been Dream 7, and somehow she'd woken up. Langford remained missing. Boone was in a federal psych unit, unfit for trial, speaking only in rhyme and ritual when questioned. The Echo investigation was declared closed, but Naomi didn't believe it. Not really. Not with the lake full again. Not with Sophie still waking in the night crying, "He's still here." She sat down by the edge of the ridge and took out Sophie's last drawing, the one she hadn't shown the others. It showed Naomi standing in the lake again, but this time there were hands rising from beneath the surface, 7 of them, and all reaching for her. Final note. 1 month later, hikers near the North Ridge reported strange activity at the far edge of the refilled lake. Lights, whispers, the sound of a child laughing. They said they saw a mirror, half buried in the shoreline mud, reflecting something that wasn't there. The Park Service sent rangers. They found nothing. But the next day, nailed to the ranger station door, was a Polaroid. It showed a little girl, standing in shallow water, smiling. Behind her, in the mirrored lake, was Naomi Vega, and her eyes were closed.